Welcome to the Story A Day podcast. This is Julie Duffy from storyaday.org, encouraging you to be a writer every day, not someday. Welcome back to the Story A Day podcast and part 2 of my conversation with Gabriela Pereira. Last time we talked a lot about values and a little bit about Gabriela's programs. This time we're going to talk even more about what it feels like to go through a program with Gabriela. And then I'll be back after the break with a prompt that she gave us last year. Something that I think a lot of writers resist is being in that community. And I wanted to ask you, so as the course runs, as the modules are dripping out, do you have live meetings where people can hang out, or is it forum based, or what happens there?
We do. So we have a couple of Q&As, and we're constantly iterating the course. We switch things up. So obviously this model may change over time, depending on the needs of the student body, et cetera. But at the moment, the Q&As are not limited only to the current students. They are anyone who's been in the class. So we do that 3 times throughout the semester. These calls are really, really exciting, really energized. People bring tons of questions. It's a lot of fun. That's one piece of the live component. We have a private Facebook group for the class, so that for folks who are on Facebook, I know Facebook sucks, we all hate it, but it was where people were hanging out anyway when we first started the Facebook group and when the course was first beginning. So we kind of started with what we had available. We are currently working on developing something that is proprietary for DIYMFA in order to have an online community, sort of asynchronous space, but that is still a work in progress. So we have that. The Facebook group is there for folks who can't make the calls or who want to engage, in between the 3 calls or what have you. And then periodically I'll just pop into the Facebook group and I'll drop a live video and I'll just explain something. Like if I'm seeing questions coming up either in the Q&As or people are emailing support with similar question, I will then do like a mini lesson and I'll hop into the Facebook group. We always archive everything not on Facebook as well, so that folks who aren't on Facebook or like me try to avoid it, like the bubonic plague, they can also access it as well. So it's a combination of asynchronous and live. I'd say it's more asynchronous in large part because we have such a global community. We're also playing with other ideas. We're playing with having some write-ins where people can just join on a Zoom call similar to this, but we don't actually talk. We just turn off the microphones and you work while everyone else in the virtual room is working. You and I have done that before in the past. And
it was incredibly effective. And actually, after we did that, I started incorporating that into the Superstars group. And it's one of the people's favorite things. It sounds really weird to sit in silence on a Zoom call with people and write, but it's so effective.
It is incredibly effective. I wanted to circle back to something you were talking about before, this idea of sort of seeing other people like being sort of different levels in the same class. I also wanted to add, a lot of people have this misconception, a lot of writers have this misconception that when you're doing a workshop, the value is in getting your piece workshopped. And we've all had at least somebody in a writing class or in a writing group who only shows up when their piece is up for workshop. And when they're not up for workshop, they just ghost the group and they never show up. And it's really annoying. But the thing is, those people are missing out, because when your work is on deck, you're actually less likely to take the feedback in. You're less likely, because there is that element of vulnerability. There's that element of, our skin is not quite as thick as we would like it to be. And it's personal too. And also we have the background knowledge. Like we know that on page 75, we answer the question that someone's having on the piece that we're workshopping here. And they just don't know that because it's coming on the next page. We have that knowledge, which then gets in the way of us being able to hear the feedback, which is, there's something missing from the page you gave us here. That's why I'm confused. So when it's our piece, we have all these like barriers to hearing the feedback and being able to implement it. But when it's someone else's work on deck, especially if we are then sharing our feedback on it, that actually is a much better educational and intellectual exercise than getting your own piece critiqued. So when you had asked about like live versus asynchronous and whatnot. One other thing, when we offer this course, in the first like day and a half that the course is open, we offer an additional bonus that's free if like you don't pay extra for it. But it is super in demand, which is why we only offer it for a day and a half, and then we have to close it, because otherwise I would be running the bonus calls for like a month. So it's a critique bonus where you bring in a page of your writing and we do a Zoom call and we work it out. Everyone who wants a critique gets one. This is why we have to limit the time, because otherwise we would get like 100 of these pages and it would be crazy town for Gabriela. But the whole idea is that you get to submit your piece, but then you also sit in and take, like, you can listen to the feedback and give feedback on everyone else's piece. And the way we do these critiques is usually we'll pack them in for about 2 weeks at the end of the course. And it's almost like a additional boot camp that you get for free as part of the course, where all the most motivated students, the ones who really wanted to be in the class and who joined right away, they're all in it and they're all showing up, and they're folks who are there literally every single call. And this one, we do try to like make the calls at different times of day and on different days of the week on purpose to make sure we can accommodate everyone who wants a critique so that they can be there if possible. And what I've noticed is that usually only about half of the people who are eligible actually submit something, but many more people show up. And the folks, often the ones who aren't submitting, are the ones who come back after and say, oh my gosh, these sessions are amazing. Why did I not know about this sooner? This is so cool. And they get the most out of it because they're not feeling vulnerable, because they're not putting their work out there, and they're able to really just put their brains into critique mode and unpacking the writing. It goes along with one of the DIYMFA philosophies is that critique is not a noun, it is a verb. Workshop is not a noun, it is a verb. So, it is about learning how to workshop or how to critique your work, someone else's work. It is not about receiving the critique or the workshopping of your piece. And so having this verb mindset as opposed to the noun mindset is another fundamental DIYMFA philosophy.
I know that when we do critiques here at Story a Day, I really notice that people are pulling things out of the works that they're reading. And it's quite often things that they're struggling with themselves, and they can suddenly see what they're doing wrong because they can see it in somebody else's work, and they're dispassionate about somebody else's work. And everyone, I think when you have a really well managed group, I think you can make it safe so that everybody is looking to make everybody else's work better. So you find the things and you're like, oh, now I see why that doesn't work. And so you learn so much more from reading and commenting on other people's work, and then you do from sort of standing there and letting everyone tell you how wonderful you are.
Exactly. Absolutely. I'm also a firm believer that, like, as the teacher, as the leader, it's my job to protect my students. And so we do a lot of work, my team and I do a lot of work to set boundaries and to make sure that we are, like, being awesome is not just a fun, like when I say keep writing, keep being awesome, I don't just mean like a fun, perky little tagline. Like, being awesome is a thing at DIYMFA. It means you take responsibility for your work. You take responsibility for what you say. So if what you say is not great and doesn't make someone feel great, you have to take responsibility for that. You also have to take responsibility for being proactive and doing the right thing. It also means being there, like being generous with your time. Like it's the service, responsibility, love stuff, right? Like it's all about the DIYMFA values, and being awesome means that you have fully encompassed those values. But it's not just about giving people sort of these fuzzy values like be awesome, be responsible, be serviceful, or whatever. I don't know what that would be. We actually have nuts and bolts things. So like the whole idea that critique is a verb, it is not a noun in DIYMFA land. Another thing that we are really relentless about is the yes and mindset. The only buts allowed in DIYMFA world is the butt that goes in the chair. Aside from that, like, you're not allowed to say, well, that's really good, but you give the feedback, and you then share whatever it is that you want to add to it. And the thing that's so remarkable about the yes and idea, this comes from improv, right? Like in improv, when you're doing a scene, if a person comes in and sets up the scene like, mommy, let's go to the supermarket. If the other person goes in and says, actually, it's not a supermarket, it's an alien planet, it derails the scene and it goes nowhere, right? You have to build on what the other person gives you. And so it's yes and applies to what you like when you're giving feedback. It applies to when you're building on a comment, like in a discussion. We don't negate what the person before you said. You acknowledge and you can offer your own perspective, but we're not going to shut it down by yes, but to the person. And so giving these sort of very tactical ground rules, I think, helps to create an environment. It's not about having all these rules. I'm a total rule breaker. Like I would bite someone's head off if they like threw a whole bunch of rules, but it's about giving people guidelines so that they know what being awesome means, so that we can all be awesome together. And once we've kind of gotten it in our bones, then we can just have fun. And that's what DIYMFA is ultimately about. Like, let's make writing fun.
Yes. Standing ovation. This has been such a great conversation, and it's not unusual for us to have this kind of conversation, but I think there's so much writing advice and classes and so many writers out there who can hang out a shingle and say, I'll teach you how to write flash fiction or a novel or whatever that. But what I really value about what you do is that you try to create an experience that is a good experience for the person who's going through it. It's not just about learning the craft and learning. There's a structure there. There's also, there's limits, and I think people will have a good sense now of what they're getting into if they come and join a DIY MFA program. I strive for the same kinds of things here at Story a Day. I think it's important to make it feel possible for people to be a writer, and that's what I hear you saying as well.
Yeah. And it's about, like, kind of circling back to what we talked about right at the beginning. It's about the practice, right? Like at the end of the day, you're not just going to sneeze out a novel and be done with it, right? But the goal here, though, is for most writers, we came to this not because we just wanted to like snap our fingers and poof, we have a novel. Like that is not the goal for most of us. Most of us do it because we enjoy it and we want to be better at it. And we take this intellectual pleasure out of improving ourselves in this realm that we are excited about. And so, writing is like, if we were able to snap our fingers, it would be very dissatisfying. It would not be fun. The fun would get squashed out of it. The key is to build that practice in a way that stays fun and stays fresh so that it doesn't feel like a grind. And let's face it, there are going to be times, I'm going to be real, there are times when it is a grind. When I had to cut my book down from 150,000 words to the lean, mean 89,000 words that it was a publication, it was a grind, let me tell you. So there are moments where you do want to bang your head against the wall or the desk or fling your laptop out the window. But there are going to be times like that. Those are pockets. For the most part, the goal is to build a sustainable life that involves writing and that has writing in your life. The other part of it too is we have to build a sustainable life that is also a life, right? Like we can't just be like servants to our writing. Like we have to be living in the world. And most of us don't have the luxury when we're starting out to just sit down and write a book and not have to worry about, putting food on the table and paying rent and all those things. So most of us have family responsibilities, a day job, all sorts of other things in our lives. And a lot of writing courses out there make it sound like it's an either or. Either you are a person and you have a normal life, or you go all in with your writing and you throw yourself into it. And, if you're not carving out the time, then clearly you don't want it badly enough. And I think a lot of MFA programs, traditional programs, ascribe to that approach too. Part of the reason why they're only 2 years long is because you could probably put your life on pause. Like most people could find a way somehow to hit pause on their life and do an MFA, like if they had to. But that's not sustainable. So you get to the end of 2 years, and then what do you do? And then you're stuck and you're having to reinvent what it looks like to have writing in your life as part of your life, as opposed to a thing that you've carved time out for. And what we try to do at DIYMFA, the big piece of it, is helping people build that life. It is not just a course on writing. It is a course on living a life that involves writing. And that's what DIYMFA is about.
Awesome. And that's one of the reasons that I've made the Superstars program the year-round program, because I think you have to go through all the seasons before it really starts to feel like you're a writer. So I love the fact that people can go through your DIYMFA program at the pace that works for them, and that they get to access it and stay connected as long as possible and really build that writing life, because we want everybody who wants to be writing. So thank you so much for coming on and talking about this today. I've really enjoyed learning more about the program, and it's always great to talk to you about writing and our personal soapboxes that we share.
Thank you so much for having me, Julie. As always, it is such a pleasure speaking with you.
And I'm going to put links in the show notes so people can go and find out all about DIYMFA and the upcoming programs. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you again on this podcast at some point.
Yay, thank you.
If you want to learn to write, don't read another book or article. Start writing. I'm here to invite you to consider the Story a Day 3-day challenge. It's a challenge and a workshop that gets people writing and completing stories in just 3 days. And it works. I'm fanatical about getting more and more diverse stories into the world, and I think yours should be among them. If you're feeling the pull to write or level up your storytelling, let me hold your hand through 3 days of short story writing. Check out the 3-day challenge at storyaday.org/3DC.
This is called the Nursery Rhyme exercise, and it is designed to help you work on voice. So you want to choose the nursery rhyme. There's 2 that I usually go to. One of them is Humpty Dumpty. So Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses, all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. The other one that I like is Itsy Bitsy Spider. Itsy Bitsy Spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. You can tell I have preschool kids or kids who were in preschool. Out came the sun that dried up all the rain, and the itsy bitsy spider went up the spout again. Anyway, you choose one of those 2 nursery rhymes, and that is going to be the plot of your story. So you've got your character, you've got either Humpty or Itsy, and you've got something that happens, and there's a whole 3-act structure there, like Humpty falls off the wall, or Itsy Bitsy goes up, rain comes down, goes back up. The key with this exercise is that now you need to choose an author whose voice you love. It could be anybody. It could be William Shakespeare, it could be Toni Morrison, it could be someone in your critique group, it could be any writer whose voice you really, really, really love. And you need to write that story with that character, but in the voice of the person you chose, the author you chose. So how would Hemingway tell the story of Humpty Dumpty falling off the wall? Or how would Toni Morrison tell that story? I have a feeling that Toni Morrison's version will be a lot more ethereal and more flowering language, and that Hemingway's sentences are going to be very choppy and short and very to the point, and lots of dialogue. So try to emulate the voice of the person you selected. This is actually a great prompt to do more than once. So once you've done this exercise, you may want to come back to it after the Story a Day challenge and do it again, choosing different writers as the sort of inspiration for the voice. Use the same nursery rhyme each time, by the way. The reason for this is that then you'll start to get a sense of how you, when you're sort of putting on another author's voice, like, you're sort of wearing that author's voice suit, how your voice behaves in that ecosystem. And eventually you'll start to get a sense for what your voice is and what you bring to the table that is completely unique. And you can then write the story of that nursery rhyme after you've done it 2 or 3 times. I want to challenge you to write that same story of the nursery rhyme now in your own voice, with your own storytelling awesomeness, and doing that. And I think this is a great exercise to practice stretching yourself a little bit in terms of your voice, but also to help you, find your voice. People always say you need to find your voice. Well, you never lost it in the first place. It's always been there. This will just help you uncover the things that make your voice especially unique. So there you have it, the nursery rhyme exercise.
Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week. And of course, keep writing.